So, my name is Madison James.
Mhm.
I'm a member of the National Honor Society here at Winchester. We would like to thank you for your willingness to be interviewed today. Our plan is to include these interviews, like segments of them, in a Veterans Day program that will be streamed in each classroom and on our school website for the public to see. Um, if just to give you an idea, we have a few questions. If you don't want to answer them, that's fine.
Okay.
So we're gonna get started. Can you please tell me your name and your years of service in the military?
My name is Mark Melanson, and I spent 13 years in the Army.
Wow, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you pick the service branch you joined?
Well, I'll give you the watered down version. I chose the Army because I grew up as an Army child.
Yeah.
I was a dependent, and I understood it. It was very appealing to me. And while I was in college, I was watching the invasion of Iraq occur, and I just felt that I needed to do my part and be a part of my generation's time.
What do you remember about like basic training and like what helped you get through it?
Okay. So one of the first things I remember about basic training was the old school mentality. So from back in those days, 2003, and obviously prior, the Army really hadn't been in a war in over a decade, and the war that we understand today in Iraq and Afghanistan and other places, that wasn't the mentality in the military. So back then, having your shoes polished perfectly, your uniforms pressed crisply, those were very important back then. And in today's Army, not very much so. So I remember some of the rigid mentality back then, as far as appearance goes, and I went through basic training at Fort Knox. So I went through in the fall and into the winter. So I remember how cold it was, exceptionally cold, and I think that's a very lost experience now than basic training is today. As far as what helped me get through, honestly, I think there's a lot of funny things that happen in the Army, and it really starts in basic training, and a lot of wisecracks, and you meet folks from all across the country. But I think the humor in a lot of things is actually what got me through more than anything.
During your years of service, are there a couple like memorable moments, people, or experience that you'd be willing to share?
Well, over 13 years, and there's more than I can even recall. So many people I've met, obviously, I've said from all across the country. Some really great friends that have come and gone, that I still have today. I couldn't really give you any one particular memory that would be better than any other. There's a lot of things I can't really share with you either. So that kind of overshadows a lot of the things maybe I could. Really, I think going back to the humor of things, there's just a really dark humor in the military that maybe might not be appropriate in what we call the real world or out here in the public. But it's certainly appreciated though, and I think how I'll answer that is that dark humor is what kind of gets folks through a lot of things, and it's there for a reason. And any particular person, there's just so many people. I could name off all day long every friend I have from the Army or other branches that I've met and had experiences with. But I will give a shout out to some very special friends of mine that are no longer with us. Lee Christian Wilson, he was a Canadian, and he was in the Army and working on his citizenship. And he died, unfortunately, in Iraq during my first time there. But we called him Moose on the Canadian thing there. He spent a lot of his childhood in North Carolina when his family did move over, and so that's where I grew up, and that's how him and I clicked a lot. I guess maybe I can share a funny moment. So in Iraq, somehow or another, a bottle of scotch had made its way over with his name on it, and so we shared some good evenings with that. I don't know if you can share that or not, but yeah, Moose was a cool dude. Likewise, Thomas Hilbert, he was a great kid from Texas. He was with Moose as well during that time, and I think that being such a quiet kid, he'd have never realized, today that so many people would remember him for what he did. And Jason Hernandez, he was one of those wisecracks that made the humor out of the experience enjoyable. Always had something funny to say, but for his age, he was quite mature.
Do you recall the day your service ended, or what did you do in the months, years afterwards?
Well, after my service ended, I won't get too deep into it, but so that's very fresh because I'm just a few years out. So in 2016, I left the Army about this time, and I had a couple of months of leave left up to use until I think somewhere early December. So my first day, my first week, technically out. I moved back here to Winchester, and I spent about a week with absolutely nothing to do, and from there on until I started making my time useful with what I do today, I was cabin fever, stir crazy, you name it. When you get out, you have an immediate shift on your entire life. Everything's organized. You know what you're going to do each and every day. You know what you're going to wear. You know who you're going to be with, working with, how long. You have training calendars that go 6 months out, maybe even a year out. So there's a lot of things that you already have planned and are in the know. The moment you get out and that goes away, it's kind of left up to you, which kind of sounds obvious, but at the same time, when you make a very quick transition and adjustment to that different lifestyle, it's pretty shocking on the body and the mind. So I spent a good couple of months really just going through the same routines that I had before. I was up at 5:30, I was working out for 2 hours, I ate my meals at the same time, but wherever those gaps were in time, that's where I'd kind of find myself sort of lost a little bit. So.
How did your service affect your life after?
Okay. Well, I guess the best way to describe that is the difference in my life. So prior to the Army, I was your average college kid, running around pretty buck wild, not a whole lot of direction, but a lot of energy for sure. I think what the Army gave me was a lot of experience in life in general. Obviously a work ethic that I really didn't have before, and a sense of timeliness, those are pretty important qualities that you know aren't unusual in the general public, but are certainly enhanced and gained by those that didn't have it before, after your time in service. So those are the biggest things that were my takeaways.
Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to add? Any stories, anything?
Boy. Well, yes, there's a lot. I think one thing I'll share is that the unique aspect of the job and working in, I can't speak for all the military, I can make assumptions, but particularly in the Army, the sort of mentality that you kind of have to suck things up and just deal with it. I've had many times where that situation has come into play, and pretty much everybody can tell you a few good stories of where they've had to sort of just deal with something. You know, goodness. So in Afghanistan, I'd gotten sick. Don't know what it was. Never would have known anyways. We were so far out from any, traditional medical facilities or anything like that, and I had a lot of people that were depending on me for decision making or showing up and doing my job. I spent probably the better half of a week with pretty high temperature, fever, and dealing with that. And finally one day I got fed up with it because we were getting ready to go out on some patrols, maybe that day or two ahead there. And so I talked to the medics, and they came up with some kind of concoction of something there, a handful of pills, something to drink, and they gave me a couple of the wool Army blankets, and so I pounded all of that. I wrapped up in the blankets, and I sat in my little makeshift bed there in a tent and sweated it out, and just broke my fever. And I thought I had been asleep for maybe 2 hours. Well, apparently I was asleep for about 15 hours. Big deal. And I woke up and it was a new day. But that's just a very short example of you just have to deal with things a different way. And majority of the time in situations like that, you'll get a prescription of ibuprofen and told to drink some water and call it good. So.
All right, that's all we have.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.